Welcome to My Hell by Lee Irwin. Prologue. November 1993. Hey, it's me. Dr. Lee. These 5 words opened the majority of the letters I sent in my correspondence with other self-publishers, as well as most episodes of the Small Press show. I was riding a wave of success as the head of Starlight Comics Group, that for a few years was the Marvel Comics of Small Press. I had a whole line of titles, a stable of artists, we were the largest mini-comic publishing group in our corner of self-publishing, and putting out an assortment of superhero and humor titles. I had won the 1992 Cindy Award for Best Publisher. And I was the host of the Small Press show. A series of 60-minute audio cassettes with interviews and talks with small press people, as well as big names like Peter David, Dan Fraga, Jim Valentino, Jim Shooter, Fred Hembeck, Kevin Eastman, Chris Claremont, Wendy and Richard Pini, Guar, well, the list goes on and on. The popularity of this show had spread from self-publishers to professional comic book people. And small press guys who were on the show were Larry Blake, Jim Main, Ian Shires, Tim Kelly, that list too, read like a who's who of small press. It was playing in people's homes all across the country, and was well received everywhere. As a musician, recording engineer, humorist, comic fan, and creative person, this format enabled me to do the many things I loved all rolled into one package. It garnered me 2 Cindy Awards, the Annual Achievement Award, where I had Adam West on the show congratulating me on my win, and the J. Danforth Quayle Golden T Award for Excellence in Promoting Small Press. With the overall popularity of the show among comic fans, small pressers, and pros, it was clear that this was something unique that had wide appeal. Instead of just reading about or hearing these comic creators' words in print in a magazine, you could actually listen to them in your home or car. Actually hearing the people was much, much different than reading about them. I had reached the point with the show where it was time to do more with it. It had potential as a money maker, and the goal was to convince one of the pro companies, preferably Image Comics, to pick it up as a product. It was new, it was different, and people were eating it up. Here in 1992, Image Comics is new, different, hot, and rich. I had also had a number of the Image guys on the show already, and Dan Fraga was totally into it and was sharing a house with Rob Liefeld. I needed to shop the idea around. So, doesn't everything just sound great? Everybody's loving Dr. Lee. The dark side. What wasn't common knowledge was that, like Rosie O'Donnell, Dick Cavett, Sally Fields, and scores of other creative people I can't think of as I'm writing this, I've been plagued my whole life since I was young with severe recurring clinical depression. If you really don't know much about it, the name doesn't sound as devastating as it really can be. It can come through your life like a train wreck and leave you standing amid the wreckage, staring at whatever's left. It had done it to me before. Many times. It would cycle, I would go long periods of time, maybe years, where I was okay. But it would come, like a dark cloud that engulfs you, like a wet blanket that just holds you down. You don't even want to get out of bed. I knew there were so many things I needed to do, I wanted to do them, but couldn't get the motivation to get up and do them. I was beginning to have a hard time getting people's orders out for the show and the comics. I had lost other, normal jobs in the past because I had reached the point where I couldn't make myself show up for work. I knew I needed to go but still couldn't do it. I would say tomorrow I'll feel better, I'll go in tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. It would be a while before I felt better. The false feeling of despair and hopelessness would pervade my life, interfering in relationships, careers, pulling apart whatever I had built up. I'm a musician, and in 1981 I decided to put together my first band, and enlisting guitar player Josh Christian in a rotating roster of singers until settling on singer-drummer Mike McPherson. The band was Centaur, and we did all original songs, playing for fun and not taking it seriously. But in a few years we were one of the area's hottest party bands, doing private parties at home and renting halls. Josh and I decided to take our popularity and honed music skills a bit farther. Centaur disbanded, but he and I stayed together to build a new band. A heavy metal club band to play out at rock clubs. It would be well over a year of auditioning people and jamming with guys before finding the right singer and drummer, with Josh on guitar and myself just strictly playing bass now. I've been adamant about image, and this time we started looking like a band. This was the mid-80s, big hair, motley crew, Rat, Poison, Dokken, and the image was important. Tokyo was born. As Tokyo, we blasted onto the music rock club scene with big hair, spandex outfits, and heavy cover tunes of the popular metal bands of the time mixed in with our own heavier original songs. The look worked for the girls, the choices of songs for the guys. It took only a little over a year before becoming the club band that could make it. But despite everything going fairly well, the depression had cycled around again and was starting to run rampant through my life. It was getting hard to move again. It was getting hard to show up for practice. I called a meeting of the band at my house and tried to explain to them as best I could what was going on with me. The depression and despair, the lack of motivation to even do anything, and how I didn't understand it and needed a few weeks off from the band to get myself together, to get out of this darkness. I had assumed this wouldn't be a problem as I was co-founder of the band, which was now called Toxic, and maybe they would understand what I was saying. No such luck. I was informed that the band needed to go on. No time to be waiting on me. Geez, Def Leppard's drummer lost his friggin' arm, and they waited for him to learn how to play with one hand. I just wanted a few weeks off from the band I helped create. But the conversation got tense, and I was told, maybe we need to find a new bass player. They left, slamming the door to my apartment. I was hurt bad. And so Toxic got picked up by Road Racer Records, toured Europe opening for Scorpions and others in front of 10,000 people, and put out 2 CDs of songs, all credited and created now by Josh Christian. If I wasn't depressed before, I certainly was now. Most people think someone who suffers from depression feels the way they might have when something bad happened to them. You have to take the way a normal person feels when depressed, and magnify that by 100. Now really try to imagine that feeling. At this point in time I had no idea what was wrong with me. I had always been labeled as lazy, the lump. I was too sensitive. Well, maybe other people aren't sensitive enough, I would often think. But as I grew older, the depression grew darker. There would be periods where it felt like sitting way down at the bottom of a deep pit, and looking up towards the light at the top and wishing you could climb back up there. But the feelings of hopelessness, despair, guilt, pain, self-loathing, self-pity all start swirling around with your emotions. It becomes hard to focus on anything else, to accomplish anything when you reach that bottom. But for the times where I didn't fall all the way down, which takes a long time or is triggered by something traumatic, I still managed to keep it hidden for the most part. I had learned to put on a happy face that manages to hide most of it, never really wanting anyone to see it. I had many things. When I started getting way down into the pit and Grace would fight with me and make me feel even worse about everything, I would cut myself. Not a cut to die from, just enough to draw blood. I would hate myself and my life so much that I just wanted to hurt myself. While with the band, it was fashionable for me to wear colored bandanas wrapped around my wrist and forearms. But a lot of the time they were covering fresh cut marks, or old ones healing. No one knew about this except Grace. This illness to me seems more emotional than mental. You don't become delusional or lose your mind or any of your mental faculties, it just slaps you with this despair and hopelessness that friggin' drains you. It becomes very frustrating to not be able to control it all the time. Let me remind you, these things I'm describing are not how I am all the time, they are instances in my life where these things happen. 95% of the time when the depression rolls and I am able to weather it, ride it through without ever reaching the bottom like this. My creative projects are like buoys that keep me afloat. Despite all that happened, Josh and I remain friends. We had been close like brothers, and have deep respect for each other's creativity and solo products to this day. Now it's 1988. A few years after leaving the band, I'm watching TV and I see this commercial with a guy laying curled up on top of a bed looking lost, and these voiceovers are saying, "There's nothing wrong with you. You're just lazy, get up. Just snap out of it. I don't understand you, why don't you get up?" This was me. Just like what I would feel and hear from people. The end of the commercial said, "Depression, and geared towards psychiatric care." The doctor that I spoke with there said basically the same thing the voices in the commercials were saying. He told me I should cut my hair and get a job, like this would solve my problems. I ended up storming out of his office and slamming the door hard. I was soured on the doctor idea for a while, but finally discovered a hospital in White Plains with a reputable psychiatric outpatient unit, and I was diagnosed for the first time with severe recurring depression. It had a name. I was relieved to find out this was actually something with a name, and there were symptoms of an illness that other people had as well. It wasn't just me. The 80s were not like today, where depression is a little more publicly known and discussed in the media. People were not aware of it then, celebrities weren't discussing it, and antidepressants were not advertised freely on television. Well known in the field, this hospital was testing many new antidepressants. Dr. Del Tito was a well-known psychiatrist and the head of the huge psychiatrist unit, and he asked if I wanted to participate in their studies of new medications. I was just thrilled it had a name, and knew nothing about the treatment of this illness I had just learned about. So I agreed and joined the program. I went in once or twice a month to speak with a doctor and tell them how I felt on whatever antidepressant they were trying out on me. But it also could have been a placebo, because this was a test program of these new medications. Nothing seemed to help very much. I had wanted to speak with a therapist, but they kept telling me I could only have group therapy, and I was totally not into talking about this with other people at the time. I wanted individual therapy. I did this for about 2 years before giving up, but Dr. Del Tito did put me on SSI, Supplemental Security Income, which helps. 1991. A year after leaving that program, I started feeling much better on my own. I was very involved in small press and enjoying it, and I decided to enroll at Center for the Media Arts in New York City. As a musician, I was very into music, and I had always enjoyed recording. Since I was young and first discovered my father's small reel-to-reel type recorder in the late 60s, I was fascinated with making my own tapes. I always had some sort of tape recorder, and made lots of bad comedy tapes growing up. Once I became a musician, I was always recording songs. A recording engineer. I thought maybe working in a recording studio would be fun, recording other bands' songs. So I went to CMA and took courses in audio engineering, graduating second in my class. Afterwards I did a 6-month internship at a recording studio in Manhattan, where we did a lot of television commercial jingles, radio spots, and I work with Eddie Jobson, who is composing music scores for television shows like Nash Bridges, and Phoebe Snow was there one day. But it was an internship and I wasn't getting paid. It was costing me a fortune to commute back and forth from Yonkers to Manhattan every day, and I was tiring of it. Deciding to strike out on my own, I landed a job as the recording engineer in the new studio right in Yonkers where I lived. It hadn't even opened yet, they were still getting it together. The name of the studio was Rough Riders. It was a new rap studio run by a black brother and sister team named Joaquin and Siobhan Dean. Rough Riders Studio, and I was their first engineer. The place was coming along all right, they had some nice equipment, even 3 keyboard synthesizers. I was psyched, but the more I was there, the more I felt like they didn't have a clue what they were doing. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of sound equipment, and they were using it as a stereo when their friends came in. I was getting discouraged. They only wanted to use samples from other people's songs for their new rapper they had discovered. I kept saying, why use samples? We have 3 great keyboards here to make our own beats and music. I can play. No, they wanted to sample. Their new rapper never was there when I was there, but I fooled around with part of one of his tracks they had on tape. I like a lot of rap, but this I had a problem with. It was all about how he robs people and kills them, kills the cops and puts their bodies on the roof, till they're starting to stink. I wasn't feeling the songs, and it really seemed like Siobhan and Joaquin were going nowhere, so I left. But my morals and principles screwed me. That rapper was DMX. If you know anything about rap, DMX is huge now, one of the hottest rap properties. He's been in films, like Romeo Must Die, and one with Steven Seagal that was even bigger but I forgot the name of it. DMX is huge, and Rough Riders is one of the top rap studios and rap stables. Now Eve is their big one. I guess I should have stuck it out there. And I read in the rap magazine source that they had taken on some big-name producer a while back, who told them to get away from the samples and start using real music, so they did and were very successful. Hey, I told them that at the beginning. Oh well. I blew that one. No bling bling for Lee. When I had graduated from Center for the Media Arts, Grace had gotten me a Tascam Porta Studio 424, a nice 4-track recording unit that I used along with my keyboards and library of sound effects to produce the small press show. Another project I did with it was a 7-song solo tape, Call Mad at the World. While the success of the show had surprised me, the success of Mad at the World surprised me even more. I had done these songs for my own listening pleasure and thought they'd be far too obnoxious for anyone else, despite knowing it was my first impressive solo effort yet. I had written and performed, recorded and produced the whole thing myself. I played LA's on Fire on episode 11 of the Small Press Shows, LA's Riots Show, along with a song old bandmate Josh Christian had done solo about the riots to give us both exposure. To my surprise, I started getting feedback saying people like my song better than his, though it wasn't a competition. I began sending people the full Man at the World tape, and got many letters back from small pressers, generally don't listen to this kind of music, saying how much they liked it and how it was in regular rotation in their car stereo. Josh even liked it, expressing interest in it playing for the record executives that he knew in the business. Okay. So Starlight Comics is doing well, with talk of Tim Goebel taking over the copying, mailing out of a lot of the titles. The Small Press Show is killing, with talk of shopping it to Image Comics and other companies. Mad at the World is surprisingly popular, with talk of shopping it to record execs. Now the bottom falls out. 15 years. That's how long Grace and I've been together. 10 of these years we lived together in her studio apartment in Yonkers. Though not married, we were married and had been together longer than my married friends, who'd all been married twice in that time. They always wanted to know when we were getting married, like it was working so great for them. I don't want any divorces behind me. Grace comes home one night and is really oddly snotty to me, talking about negative things about me and how she could find someone else. When I asked this next question, I really hadn't anticipated in a million years that the answer was yes. Are you seeing someone else, or something? That's right, she answered smugly, this bizarre, cold look coming over her face I had never seen before. We had been getting along fairly well before this, so I never saw it coming. She had given me cards recently stating how much she loved me, and we'd be together forever. She was the last person anyone who knew her would have thought might have cheated. She informs me happily she is indeed seeing someone else, and that I would have to move out. Just like that. I spiral immediately, like a crashing rocket flaming out, to the deep dark recesses of the pit. The next 3 days are spent sobbing, crying, and begging her to tell me we weren't over, but her demeanor never wavered for a second. She had been there with me through everything, and I thought she always would be. We had been inseparable. I was lost. Lost in the darkest place I had been yet. The intensity of the depression magnified the feelings of loss, betrayal, hurt, despair, self-blame, hopelessness, and frustrated anger all were becoming too much to handle. They introduced one that I hadn't gotten so close to yet. Suicide. Sure, we had flirted before, but never became as intimate as this time. It is Sunday night, day 3 since the news. Dark outside, and the cold November air is quite windy on the rooftop of our apartment building. My eyes are red with tears, my forearm red with cuts. A sob catches in my throat as I checked my pants pocket for the note I had written. Standard, goodbye cruel world, fair, I'm sure. The wind is even colder as I step to the ledge. It's 8 stories down, but looks a lot more when on the ledge staring bleakly down at the parking lot below through tears of total despair. I honestly didn't want to live anymore. I talked to God, telling him I was sorry, that I know everyone has life disappointments, but I really felt I couldn't deal with them anymore. The pain was too much. The majority of the story you're about to read was written in 1993. It is all true.